How are virtual meetings different from face-to-face? I'm Chad, and my job is working with some of the most intelligent, smart, innovative companies and top universities to help make connection and engagement easy and make meetings come alive. And so in this video, I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to share everything I know about how virtual and face-to-face are different, but maybe even more importantly, the similarity between them, which we can harness to make both face-to-face and virtual meetings more effective. Let's get into it. So jumping in, whether you're going face-to-face or virtual, where you compare the two, it's kind of like teleportation gone wrong. Meaning like you lose a limb, you lose some things, but you also like gain a finger, right? So the virtual meetings have some things that face-to-face doesn't, and face-to-face has some things that virtual doesn't. And so let's dive in right now into 5 core differences between virtual and face-to-face meetings, and maybe more importantly, one similarity between the two that we can harness to make our meetings more engaging, impactful, effective. So number 1, virtual meetings, you've got no legs, right? You have no evidence right now that I have legs. When you're on Zoom, you have no evidence that somebody has legs. In person, it's pretty obvious. Now, I'm sharing that as a playful difference, but that means there's a whole lot less nonverbal context and a whole lot more nonverbal context here, right? Virtual, you're on mute. In person, you can't really be on mute unless you leave the building. And so being on mute, you miss all the context, right? So when you're sharing something as a leader or the meeting facilitator or the trainer, or whatever your role is in that meeting, you can't hear the chuckles, the laughters, the snickers, the side conversations, the eye rolls, right? And so that mute and unmute is a really big difference. Meeting virtually, you have a fridge that allows you to procrastinate and eat lots of food when you don't want to do work. When you're in person, you're kind of trapped and present, no fridge, right? And so acknowledging the fact that you have the distractions of your home, right? And I'll categorize that as fridge and no fridge. But acknowledging that you have the distractions of your home present can be an issue, right? So we got to be intentional about how we carve out space and time to be present. But it also offers advantages because we get to go have lunch with our kids or our family or our spouse or our dog or our lizard. Right? So on the flip side, on the positive flip side of that, you also have here an entire world surrounding of context around you, right? So in a face-to-face meeting, I can't say, leave your space right now and go grab an object that represents a part of who you are. This is Otto, my little guy, born January 1st of 2020. What a year to be born in, right? So in person, I can't ask you to do that. If we're meeting in a conference room, you don't have the context of all around you. So there's a lot of really creative ways that you can use people's space, invite them to actually leave their virtual bubble and go grab something that represents the topic that they want to share today. Grab something that represents their takeaway from the meeting, etc. Right? Because you can incorporate visuals and that movement and activity, which really increases meeting engagement. Face-to-face, you're kind of stuck with what you've got, either the stuff you bring into the room, or if you're in a conference ballroom or a conference room or an office or a classroom, right? You're kind of stuck with what you've got in that space. And then the other core difference is that face-to-face, we have this organic connection that happens, right? People show up to a meeting a couple minutes early, we have some side conversation, some connection. Culture develops at the water cooler. Virtually, we're in a vacuum until exactly at 9 a.m. when the meeting starts, and then we click the link and we're pop into our little portal. And so we lose that organic connection. So virtually, the side benefit of that though is that we have to, it requires us to be more intentional with our connection. And so as somebody who thinks and writes about connection quite a bit and created this entire toolkit designed to amplify connection, belonging, and trust that's packed with a whole heap of activities, fresh group exercises to spark connection, right? I know how important that is. A mountain of research says that if we don't connect, right, engagement, morale, productivity all go down. And so when we're working and meeting remotely, it's really important to build in time for that connection before content, before jumping in. Being intentional with it, though, means that maybe we can avoid some of the idle chit chat and small talk that some people, especially introverts, hate, and start off with more meaningful, intentional questions, right? So what would it look like if I were to start off a meeting and just say, hey, I'm curious what you all think about this idea, this quote, listening is being able to be changed by the other person, right? Virtually, I can do that really easily by just holding that up. In person, I need to print something out, I give a handout, write something on a whiteboard, right? So we can use all these analog visuals around us to represent and share parts, to make our content come alive. So those are some differences. Perhaps the most important similarity is the purpose. It's the purpose of why we're meeting, right? I think we do ourselves a disservice when we say, okay, here we were going to have this, 2-3 day offsite. Now we have to do it virtual. And so how can we convert this face-to-face meeting to a virtual context? Wrong question. A much better question is, what can we do better virtually than we can in person? Right? So using that context, using that space, using people's ability that they have the access of the entire internet right next to them. Right? There's a lot of stuff using the ability in the chat, right? When you're meeting virtually, everyone can speak at the exact same time and listen to each other at the exact same time in the chat. So you can go around and introduce yourself in like 30 seconds. Whereas in person, that might take 15, 20 minutes to get around the room. Besides, when we're introducing ourselves in an in-person, face-to-face context, going one at a time around the room, we're focused on this person. It's very hard to actually hear anybody around us. Whereas when we are meeting virtually and everybody can type into the chat, they can focus on themselves for a quick minute while they type their intro, and then they can scroll up the chat and focus on the group. They flip that perspective from me to this focus on others, right? So you can actually accelerate conversations. Brainstorming 101 is to brainstorm alone first and together second. And so virtually, you can have everybody type into the chat their idea for a particular project, task, etc., and type it in, but don't press enter. And then 3, 2, 1, all press enter at the same time, and all those ideas come up with, and so you essentially avoid groupthink. Much harder to do in person. You got to get sticky notes. They're messy. Then how are you going to capture sticky notes, right? So there's a lot of advantages and disadvantages to both, because when you're meeting face to face, you cannot replace legs. You can't replace context. You can't replace that shared experience. You never will be able to, unless you're watching this video in like 2050 and we figured out some way to replicate all of that. But for right now, there is no way to fully replicate that. So coming back to the similarity of virtual and face-to-face meetings, purpose. Priya Parker, in one of my favorite books, The Art of Gathering, talks about how we should really meet for purpose rather than for time. And so rather than trying to figure out how to convert your meeting either to face-to-face or to virtual, think about, why are you meeting? What is the purpose of your meeting? And how can you use the tools and the differences between each to make that purpose come alive and accomplish it? I hope this video was wildly useful for you. I spend my entire life thinking about and helping organizations, teams, and individuals make connection and engagement easy. And I believe that that's an idea that should be accessible to everyone. And so check out the link in the description for a whole bunch of free tools, from an excerpt from our book, Ask Powerful Questions, Create Conversations That Matter, to a free digital sample of our connection toolkit, which incorporates a ton of really cool creative questions to help spark meaningful dialogue and connection in both in-person and virtual meetings. Hope this was phenomenally useful. Have an awesome day.